Welcome to MFCP Woodworking and welcome to Turning Wood Reviews. Today we're going to be reviewing Swamp Alder. Swamp Alder's scientific name is Alnus incana. If you look it up online, you'll see that it has no commercial value. Farmers scrape it up into piles and burn it. The only people I've ever known who use anything useful with it is to use it as an emergency firewood. It does burn green, so we've used it for that some. It burns fast, it burns hot, so if you want a fire going over the night, forget it. You fill your wood stove right full, it'll get mighty hot, and in a couple hours it'll be burned out. But what happens when you turn it? What happens when you put it on a wood lathe? I was kind of curious because, as you can see, I have access to not just acres of this stuff. I've got access to square miles of it. There's acres and acres of it right here. According to the book, it only grows to about 3 inches in diameter. If you look close in here, you will occasionally find a piece that's between 4 and 5 inches. And that means you can actually do stuff with it. It has some good qualities to it, actually. I've actually turned some of it and I was pleasantly surprised. So today we're going to review this wood. We're going to take it and we're going to turn some up. 3 projects. We're going to do a little bit of detail work and talk about its limits by turning a chess pawn, my own design. Then we're going to turn a small bowl. Now, because it doesn't grow in big diameters, we're going to have to do a glue up. It does glue well. It does stick. It does bond well together. Not all woods do. And after that, we're going to do some end grain work. We're going to turn a goblet. Those are 3 very challenging products, and if it's a really crummy work, it won't work. But I wanted to push its limits, and you'll see the results. So come on with me, and we're going to turn this wood. Making chess pieces out of alder came about as a bit of a fluke. As you can see, I'm using a template. I've done this more than once. This design I originally came up with as a large, very massive chess piece, which I made out of SPF lumber, and I tried to scale it down and make my 2x4 series, something I'm working on, and do the same thing, only smaller. Only it didn't work. The collars of the pawns and the little beads along the bottom kept chipping out. No matter what I did, they kept chipping out. Now, just by chance, I had a chunk of alder already, and I said, well, I'll put that in the lathe and see if I can make a piece out of that. I was not expecting it to do well. I wasn't expecting it to come out right. I expected it to chip just as badly as the SPF lumber, because in practice it does chip, it does tear the grain. I do have problems with tear out if I'm not careful, if the tools aren't sharp. I didn't see that it was really that much different than the SPF lumber, but I made the first piece. I worked quickly and I succeeded, no problem. And it wasn't a one-time fluke. I was able to do it over and over and over again. In fact, I have enough pieces almost now, the small pawns, to make an entire chess set. And I will complete the entire set made with alder. I am still going to do the 2x4 series of chess sets, but I had to make something simpler. That's a whole story in itself. I have shot footage for that purpose, and then eventually that'll come up on the channel here as well. As you can see, I'm taking a piece that's already been made to compare, to try to make them match. One thing when you're making chess pieces, you want to make pieces that are pretty close to each other. If you're working with natural wood though, it's less of an issue than if you're going to paint the pieces. If you paint the pieces white or paint them black, they have to be very close because you'll notice a difference. But when you're using pieces that are natural wood, the grain and all will give you a little more room for error, and your pieces will still look like they match together because I'm freehanding them all here. But it worked, and I was able to make pieces with the alder, and as you can see, this piece is coming along quite nicely, and I just make them. It's easy to do, and I will eventually do a full video on that, although with the alders I don't have the footage for it, but for the ponds, for the 2x4 material, I do already have full footage for that. And as you'll see now, I'm using a tool to cut it off here. I'm using my parting tool here. And that piece is just about ready to come off. Once it comes off, we'll sand the bottom on a sander. I won't be showing that. But that's the next step, and then you put a finish on it. It's pretty much done. And from here we'll move on to the next project. Now this, get a good look at the pond there. This next project is the glue up for a bowl. And as you can see, what you're looking at is the bark turning. I glued 5 pieces together that I cut so that I cut up with a table saw so that they could be glued together. Like I mentioned earlier, alder glues very well. It bonds together without any difficulty at all. As you can see, it just got started cutting into this. I do the bottom first. The only thing I found with this was that I used a lot of wood. I can make a lot of nice stuff out of the wood that I used to make one bowl. It's coming along here. So you can see the machine slows down a little bit. I do have some deficiencies in my equipment. I'm hoping to upgrade the lathe sometime in the not so distant future. I'm forming the bottom of the bowl first. It's attached with a faceplate to the machine with 4 screws. I'm creating a tenon on the bottom here. In fact, something very large. As you can see, the wood shavings are coming off quite nicely. I did not actually expect that, because when I did my spindle turning before, the shavings for alder come off a little bit splintery. It does require a great deal of sanding compared to most other woods, but it sands well, so it's not like it's a difficult task. But I was able to sand it smooth quite easily without any trouble. The pedestal on the bottom is about the size as far as I can go with my my chuck. That's about as big as I can make it. And you'll see in a few moments here, I'll be attaching that to the bowl so that we can reverse it on the machine and bowl out the inside. And here it comes. As you can see, I've got it set out as wide as it can go, and I only have to turn it a little bit to get it to bite. I don't know why I like bowls with little pedestals rather than the indents. I cut a slight indent in so that when I finish the bottom, the middle isn't going to wear on the table as much, and where I put my my information, the date I made it, and my signature, along with my company name, that won't wear off with time. And quick look at the camera to make sure it's ready to go, and we'll start bowling out the inside. As you can see, I'm using a heavy skew. This is actually the first time I ever used it because I just purchased that just before I made this project. In fact, it was still factory sharp. I didn't have to sharpen it at this point yet, and I was able to do the entire project without having to sharpen it. In fact, I was able to do all 3 projects with all the work that I did with this tool. I never had to sharpen it. That's one thing I found with the Alder as opposed to the SPF lumber. What I really liked about it was that I didn't have to, it wasn't hard on the tool's edge. I didn't have to keep sharpening it over and over again. Whereas with the SPF lumber, for whatever reason, it does dull my edges pretty quickly. I would have done one project and I would have had to sharpen it. You can see the grain pattern actually comes out kind of nice. I really like it. In fact, this bowl is one of my favorites. I continue to bowl it out here. He's sanding again. Time to sand it out. Of course, I go through the various grits like anybody should. One thing you will notice is that I don't do a lot of finishing on the machine. That's not because I don't think it does a good job. In fact, I would prefer to do it on the machine, but my shop is not heated and it gets quite cold, and not all finishes perform well when it gets that cold. You'll notice in other clips that I'm often working with gloves on. And now we're moving on to the 3rd project. This is the Goblet. And as you can see, I just chucked a piece of alder trunk or alder branch in there. This one's fairly hefty, probably over 3 inches. I take the bark off. One little thing about working with alder. This wood is actually quite dry. It's been sitting around our house, our hunt camp, whatever you want to call it, for probably 4 or 5 months. Close to the wood stove, it's had a chance to become very dry. I did take the time to chuck up a piece straight off, cutting it from outside. I would recommend, if you're going to cut with alder, don't ever do that. Alder is a very wet wood. It has a lot of moisture in it. When I mounted it direct after, I just cut a chunk off a tree, mounted it on the lathe to see what would happen. You can see the spur end of it chewed away at the wood, and eventually it went flying. Actually, I didn't think to let it go that far. But also, when I was skimming off the bark and everything, it was like getting it was getting spit on the whole time. It was so wet, it was just splattering me, literally getting splattered by the work. And the issue is shrinkage after you've done the work. So that piece never saw the light of day. In fact, it got set aside, cracked all up, and it probably went up my chimney. I've never done that since. I don't recommend doing it. It's not a good choice to turn this wood green. Although a lot of woods you can turn green, and sometimes they turn a lot easier. Don't do that with this swamp alder. That is a bad mistake. What I'm doing here now is hollowing out. I'm going right in on the end grain. This is the first time I ever did this with alder, and I was a little skeptical that it would work. It did. It is prone to tear out. If I did with this with SPF lumber, I would likely tear out too much or too easily. I mean, I'm sure it can be done if you go carefully enough, but I don't have time to spend way too much time making sure that I'm not chipping out or tearing out the grain. And I'm going to go testing the depth of my finger. The tool that I'm using here is a very old small spindle gouge, small gouge, and I can't go very deep with it. You'll notice that as we're going here. I'm very limited as how far I can go. Since I turned this piece on the lathe, I have purchased a new one that's beefier and longer, and I can go quite small. I specifically bought that so I could do goblets and all. So on the channel here, you're likely to see more goblets. The end grain actually worked. I was actually able to turn it without serious problems. You have to be careful. It is prone to catches. It is prone to tear out and splinters and chips. But if you're careful, you can control it. And I was very pleased to find that out, because now I'm going to make even more stuff with this type of wood. My technique is not necessarily the best. I'm pretty much self-taught. I have been watching other turners online and trying to learn from them. I think I'm getting better. Technique, though, is something you'll learn better from somebody like Mike Peace, the guy who does Worth the Effort channel. Both of these channels, I highly recommend these guys. These guys know how to handle their tools better than I do. But as you can see, I'm learning from them, and I'm successfully making this. One thing you'll notice right now, watching the turning, I've brought in a cone center. I made that with a piece of maple. That was made so that I could do this project with more stability when I do the stem. I do have footage for that, and we'll be putting out a video on how to make that later on. Probably in the next week or so. It depends. I've got a couple of small ones. I won't be able to do these larger videos every week. It's too much work. I will try to get them out every other week if I can, but no promises. Working the detail here. But as you can see, this wood is versatile enough. So I'm going to start giving my final review on this on a scale of 5, 1 being absolutely awful to work with, 5 being excellent. I actually have gone up and given this a 4 out of 5. I had seriously considered a 3.5 out of 4 out of 5, but no, it's worth the 4. You can make just about anything out of this if you have the skill level. If you don't have the skill level, you'll have trouble with it, but it's good to learn on. It's not very forgiving, but if you do well, you will make good projects. You will have great, you'll have success with it, especially if you have access to it, because usually you can get it for nothing. And like I said earlier, I have access to more than I could ever use of this material, so expect to see more of it. So a 4 out of 5 it is. I'm just in the process of cutting it off the machine here with the parting tool, and I will sand that and sign the bottom of it and put it on my Etsy shop eventually here. That may take a little while. All 3 projects here were successful. I'm not likely to show you unsuccessful projects because I want to show you what can be done with the wood. Remember that you're going to need to sand it, so you're going to need the sandpaper. I will post additional videos accompanying this, a playlist showing all the things that I've made out of alder, and that list will become massive with time. Also, this will be on a playlist for other reviews. If you like this video, please give me a like and subscribe so that you can be notified when others were coming. Make sure to hit that notification bell. A lot of my subscribers haven't done that in the past, and I haven't really pushed the issue. If a notification comes up and you don't see it, well, you won't see it. And I will try to get these out and post regularly. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully I've earned your some subscriptions showing this. And I'm looking forward to doing another kind of wood in a couple of weeks and doing the same thing. Thanks for watching. Always remember, be safe, keep your fingers, wear your safety equipment.